So, Miss Saigon, what did you personally think of the book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie?
I liked it. I thought it was short, but it was very informational. It was interesting. I thought it was a good young adult reading book.
Is there anything else about the book specifically you liked?
I thought there was a lot of death in it. I thought there was a lot of sad things in it. I thought it was interesting. About the Indians, a lot of them being alcoholics and living on the reservation, and the people that didn't like them. That was about it.
Okay. So, you are a parent. How many children do you have and how old are they?
I have 3, 2 girls and a boy. One that's 20, one that's 18, and one that's 13.
Do your 2 younger kids, the 18-year-old and the 13-year-old, go to public or private school?
One goes to public and one goes to private.
Which one goes to each?
The 13-year-old goes to a Catholic grammar school, and the older one goes to the public high school. But they all went to Catholic grammar school.
Okay. And is your son going to go to public high school?
Yes, he will.
Okay. So, if either of your kids, if you got like a letter in the mail or an email from your school saying that your kid was going to be reading a book in their English class or any class that was going to contain controversial themes such as sexual themes, drug addiction or alcoholism, sexual or physical abuse, or bullying and profanity and anything like that, how would you feel about that?
I would feel fine. I would want to read the book before they did, if possible. But if the school let them read it, I would think that would be okay.
You would trust the school?
I would trust the school, and they can't be sheltered. I mean, they have to learn some of this stuff and read some of this stuff before they go out in the world. You can't just let them read a book and then not know any of these things.
Why do you want to read the book for them?
Just so I can, if they have any questions, or if I think that maybe they should know some of the things that they're talking about, or especially if it's my son, some of the stuff that they talked about in there were young guy stuff. If he didn't get it or he didn't understand why that happened, so if he asked me, I could explain it. And if it was a girl and she asked me about it, then I could explain that to her, so I would know what they were how it was in context. They used it.
Do you think your son or daughter would come to you with questions, or do you think you'd kind of have to?
I think I would kind of have to say something about it.
And do you think after you say something, they'd be comfortable talking to you, or still?
Yeah. I think if I read the book before, and then I said, oh, are you at this part or this part? And they would say, oh, yeah, this, and I'd say, oh, what did you think about this part? I think that if they were uncomfortable with it or said something about it, I could answer what they wanted to know without them feeling embarrassed or not knowing.
So you'd be okay with them reading a controversial book as long as you got to read it before them or along with them?
Yes, or had the opportunity that I was told that I could do that beforehand.
So you would like the school to keep you involved?
Yes.
Would you also appreciate, like, some schools will have like an info night for the parents before the kids start the book?
Yes.
They kind of come in and the teacher talks about it?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
They're going to see these things on TV, so might as well, and if they're going to read about it, that's fine. I mean, I'd just like to know what they're seeing and reading.
In your opinion, what was the most controversial part of the book?
The bullying with the whites and the Indians, and the drinking. I thought that was, about the Indians being bums, sort of, and they just drank, but then there was good things, I mean, that the families all knew each other, they knew all their family members, things like that. And then the kid going to a white school instead of staying at the reservation, and how he was treated by everybody, and even the teachers, until he was popular because he was dating the girl. But
What was the most moving part of the book for you?
when the sister died,
Why was
that was
that
just
more
so
moving?
sad.
Because a couple people died in the book. Why
I
was
thought it was so sad because it was his sister. He was very close to his sister, and he wanted his sister to get out of the life that she was going to be living at the reservation. She just moved to a different reservation, and then I thought it was horrible how the poor grandma died, and she was a big part of his life. It was just very sad. A lot of nice people died that were in his life, and it was pretty much just his mom and dad at the end.
What are some topics you wouldn't want your kids to read? And it could be at all, or just maybe like you think right now your son is too young to read about this, or your daughter's too young to read about this.
About rape, maybe, and more like sexual experiences, if they talked about it more in depth. Drugs, maybe, and how they feel when they do drugs, things like that. If it was a book that talked about some of the same things, but it was more in depth and made it seem more romanticized.
Made it sound better, like made the drinking sound good.
Made the drinking sound good, and everybody's life works out, and the sex part of the girl, you know, if that went more into depth, that they actually were together or something, and how great it was, and things like that, because it was only a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah. So that would be for your son?
That would be for my son and my daughter. I mean, I would just not want that stuff at a young age, that the people in the book were that young and this was happening, and it to sound all this great stuff when you know there's a lot of other things that would come along with that in real life.
So the same for the 18-year-old, or is there anything other,
Yeah.
any other?
That, the 18-year-old, that when the girl ran away to get married and met this guy, that they didn't go into depth how great it was or how things were perfect and they all worked out for everybody. Or
So you think that would have been, if they made it sound good, running off?
yeah,
You
I
wouldn't
mean,
have liked that for the 18-year-old?
I wouldn't have liked that
Because
for the
she's
18-year-old.
coming out of high school and you don't want her to get
Take
ideas.
off. No, or the, like, if there was drugs and stuff like that, I wouldn't have wanted her to see.
But it's okay if it's real life experiences of drugs, not really making it sound.
Yes, if it was not being romanticized.
If it was telling it how it is.
Yeah. I thought it was a very innocent book.
Have either one of your kids wanted to read a book that you didn't want them to, either ever or just at that time? And if so, what was your reason?
There was one, I think, that my older daughter wanted to read when she was younger, and I just thought, oh my gosh. It was something her 4th grade teacher let her read. And she told me, oh, it's about murders and mysteries, but it turned out to be an innocent, funny murder book, like, not horrible. And then there was a book that my 18-year-old wanted to read when she was younger, about young love or something, and I was like, oh no, maybe not.
Just because it was...
Just because it was romantic, like it was like a young lover book kind of a thing that she shouldn't have been reading at that age.
So it's just age-wise?
It was just age-wise. To be impressionable at that age.
And your son hasn't really wanted to read?
No, not at all. It's hard to get him to even read.
Is there any... Has it happened more with movies? They've wanted to watch movies too, like that they were too young?
No, I think both.
Same amount?
No, Evan doesn't even want to watch movies. He doesn't want to watch movies or books. Maybe video games. He wanted to watch some violent video games that I wouldn't let him watch, and we used to just turn the sound off for him.
So it's just the violence and...
The violence or talking to women badly and him thinking, like, that sounds cool, or the swearing. I didn't want that. That was the only thing with him was video games. The girls' movies they wanted to watch, being too young. Because there's a lot of swearing and stuff like that. And a lot of sexual innuendo. Then That was, but it was probably equal books and movies, not either one.
And I forgot to ask this before, but you said you wouldn't want your kids to read about rape. Is that just at the age they are now? Or do you think they should never read?
No, I think they can read it, just at different ages. I don't think it's right. Like the 13-year-old, I wouldn't want him reading that now. The girls would be fine. They're old enough. They know all that, so that would be fine. But at a young age, I wouldn't want them to read that.
And do you think but your son at some point should read it?
Yeah.
You think guys
maybe
should
in a year? Yeah. Maybe even now, or he can later or something, but just not right now.
Read what?
Stop! I'm recording this.
Oh.
I have to wait to edit it out. You can ask after.
How long is it take?
I don't know, Ash. You gotta stop. What topics from books do you want your kids to learn about? What do you think are good things they should be reading about now? The 13-year-old and the 18-year-old.
About history, about bullying, about people that did horrible things to people back years ago, and now it's come up that things have been, that they weren't this great person that everybody has portrayed them to be. Famous people, things like that. I'd like them to read about people's rights, and know how to deal with that. Let's see. I'd like them to read about political views, things like that. Different countries, how they do politics, how things there are so different from here, because my daughter wants to travel around the world, but things are so different to other places, and I don't think she actually realizes that. So I'd rather her read stories about it to see that not everything's great on the other side. It's not this big adventure of life. Things are different everywhere you go. My son, I would like him to read about famous people, good people, people that weren't so great. About history, so he knows the mistakes that he doesn't want to make. And I like him to read good books, bad books, so you know the difference.
Good as in it's a positive book, or
a positive
negative
book,
or you mean a badly written and a good written?
Both, but like a positive book of, all nice things and good things, and then books that have horrible things that happen into them, like Rwanda. I mean, that book and stuff like that. Bad things happen, and he's very sensitive, so I hope he sees it and realizes how it is and things like that.
And why do you think it's good for your kids to read? Because a lot of parents don't agree with that. A lot of parents don't want their kids to read about.
Because I think you should know what's around the corner. I don't think you should not know what can happen to you when you're out and about. Life's not great.
And so I'm sure in some schools or in some classes they do talk about those topics. What is the advantage you think to reading it in the book to just talking about it in a class?
I think sometimes reading it makes you actually realize that it does happen when you talk about it in the class. It seems like it's not really happening, that it's not a story, it's not a face, it's not a person. In a book you have a character, you have a person. You're living the book as you're reading it.
What topics from The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian do you want your children to learn about?
The bullying aspect, that just because these poor people were Indians and they were tortured and thrown on a reservation and they were poor and had no money and they all drank. There was good things about their life. They had horrible situation. They were put in a horrible situation, and we put them there. And how that hopefully in their day and age they can help them get out of the situation that they're in, and they should get more than they possibly have. The bullying, that was one part of it. That, even if you're black, you're white, you still get bullied. But I would like them to realize that white people have a huge advantage over everybody.
Do you think either of your kids don't realize?
I don't
That's
think,
something-
I think nobody does until you're in that person's shoes. I think it's impossible. I think you try to realize it, but it's impossible.
Do either of your kids seem to be aware of like
Yes.
racial privilege?
Yeah, I think my middle one is more aware. But I also think my son is too, but it's not as important to him maybe, or he doesn't see it that much. He doesn't go to school with anybody that's not
Let's say
white.
He's from a private school.
He's from a private school and there's
do
no
you
black kids there.
Do you think it would be different if he went to public school? Or
I think it would. I think it would be a lot different. I think it's different when you go to school with everybody and, you know, you see how everybody's different. And you have a lot more kids and a lot more ethnic people. The whole thing changes. Now he just goes to school with all kids exactly like him. There's no difference in the smartness, there's no slow kids because they're taken out. So he goes to school with all pretty much the same kind of kid. You know, A, B, C students. Nobody has a learning disability. No one has a physical disability. It all goes the same.
so do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing or both?
I think it's a good thing for me because my child has an easier time of it. I think that I don't have to worry quite as much about bad influences, if there are. But the other part is he lives in a little sheltered little life, and when he gets to high school, it'll be a whole different ball game for him, and that's hard. And that's hard for him. I know I'll be more nervous when he's in high school to think about who he's hanging out with, what he's talking about, does he know what's going on. I worry about him getting into drugs, into hanging out with the wrong kids because he doesn't know anybody, things like that.
So do you think reading this book before he goes to high school would help with any? Would help
It might
with
make
that
him think.
transition?
It might make him think a little bit just about how people are different, and I mean, he's never a kid that would bully anybody, so that wouldn't influence him not to bully someone. He doesn't bully people, but he might, feel more comfortable to be able to walk away from them, to see you don't have to be with people that you don't really like just because they're popular.
Does your son seem to be? Do you think he's concerned with popularity, or?
I think he is a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. I think he likes to play sports. He wants to be picked on a team, so that's important to him. That he hangs out with kids that are good baseball players, ball players, soccer players.
So I think he's going to be a jock.
Yeah, and he wants to hang out with the kids that do that. So he'll have to be accepted into that group. Plus he's smart, so he has to be accepted into the smarter classes with those kids. And a lot of them don't play sports if they're really smart.
Do you think the basketball aspect of the book would interest him?
That would interest him. Because here you had a kid that didn't play very good basketball, but he could do a lot of baskets. But then in the game it came that everybody had so much encouragement towards him and said he was a great player that he became a great player. All because of everybody's influence in him, and his self-esteem went up.
So from the book, you'd like your kids to take away the bullying and the racial, think more about racial privilege.
Yes, and about racial privilege and about how it is to be poor, that there's other things to think about. I mean, the poor kid only had $5 and he had to bring his date out for pancakes and he didn't even have enough money for that. Things like that, to think about someone else before you want to drag somebody in to spend money that maybe they don't have, or think about everybody has a different life than you did. They might not have parents that love you, or they might live with their father, or they might just live with their mother, and things might not be great there.
Going to the scene at the diner, do you think your son will be the kid to, like I forget his name, but the jock who gave him money when he told him in the bathroom?
I think he would give the person money, yes.
And
But Evan would want it back.
it's a loan.
With interest.
It's a loan.
It's just a loan, not just give it back whenever.
But do you think, would he maybe be suspicious about it, or do you think he would be maybe just like, here's the money, no questions asked, but I'd like it back, but...
I think it would be a little bit more than that he would take to get out of it. He wouldn't just hand over $40. He'd probably say, I'll cover your, 20 cents that I need to pay.
So, what are some topics you think we'll start with the private school. What are some topics you think at the private school would not be allowed to be taught at the Catholic school? And it could be
in the
from
book?
this book or any book you could...
In this book, maybe saying boner and those kind of words that the kid would get from looking at the girls.
I think the masturbation scene would probably have been not even a scene. It was kind of just him talking about it.
Yes, that probably would have been okay. In maybe the drinking and hitting the one kid. And it probably wouldn't have been because they're living on a reservation and they're poor. I don't know how that would go over there. I think they like to keep it a little bit more.
You don't think a Catholic school would teach about a diverse...
But in the book, the kids were Catholic. If you notice, the Indians were Catholic. So maybe, I don't know. I think maybe they wouldn't want all the diversity in there. It all depends. I mean, I don't know. Some of their reading material's a little bit boring there. But the boner thing would not have been allowed in there.
So do you think they just would have maybe not allowed the book at all, or maybe would have taken it
They might have
out?
taken some of it out. But all around, I think it was a good educational book for that age group, and even younger.
How much younger do you think?
I think 6th and 7th grade, 8th grade.
Okay. And what about the high school? Do you think?
I think they would have been able to read that. That would have been fine.
Okay. And do you think they would have taken anything out, or just...
No,
You think they would have been okay?
that would have been fine.
Do you know, has a book ever been challenged in your kids' school, or maybe when you were younger at a school?
When I was in 6th grade, we were not allowed to read the book Dear God, It's Margaret. And I can't remember who it was by.
I'm not familiar with that book. Do you know why? What was
Because there was a
of it?
part that the girl had sex when she was young. She was like 13 or 14. And she got her period in the book. And then she didn't get her period, or she was afraid she was pregnant. But I remember we were not allowed to read the book. We were not allowed to have the book in school. And if we did have the book, our parents had to be called in. Because everybody in 5th and 6th grade were passing it around to read parts of it. In my kids' school, I think my older daughter, when she was in junior high, there was a book they couldn't read. But I can't remember what it was. They didn't think it was appropriate. I think the religious teacher didn't think it was appropriate.
When you were younger and that book was not allowed at your school, did you want to read it?
Yeah, made me more want to read
So
it.
you-
Then I went and got a copy of it to read it.
Did you want to read it before they said anything?
No, not at all.
Did you read it when they passed it around, or did you not get it?
I never got it passed to me, so I never got to read it. So I bought the book and read it at home.
Did you think it was that bad when you read it?
Oh, yeah. There was a lot of spots in there. I think she masturbated in the book. I mean, I just remember it was a young girl like our age, my age, and I think I was in 5th or 6th grade. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh. Or she was a year older than us or something.
So looking back on that book now, do you agree that?
Yes, I do agree. We should not have been reading that book. I mean, it probably wasn't as bad as I can think back now, but there were some spots that made it seem like, oh, I could do this. I remember thinking, oh, it was okay if this happened or something. I remember it was bad, and I remember thinking, oh, it's okay, because it was in the book.
Yeah. Was there anything when you read that book, did you not know about some of the stuff that happened?
Oh, there was a lot of stuff in there I didn't know.
And did you go talk to your parents? No. Did you talk to anyone?
No. Now, I probably would have if my mother mentioned it and said, oh, this in the book I'd like to talk to you about. And I would have probably said, oh, my God. Or I would have probably just put down that book and stopped reading it altogether if I would have known she was reading it with me. But, yeah, I probably wouldn't have read it if she was reading it.
So if that happened with one of your kids now, with that book or a book like that, how would you have probably...
I would have hurried up and read the book so I could answer their questions. And if it was as bad as I can remember at that age, I would have told them absolutely they could not read it. Or I would have said, not right now, I'll let you read it next year. And then by that time she would have forgot about it. But I would have just tried to not say absolutely not, because then she would have wanted to read it like I did. I would have tried to just postpone her from reading it a little bit.
So you don't know this, but... So, if you do know this, or if you knew from when you were a kid, if a book is challenged at one of your kids' schools, do you know how the school handles that? And challenge is just like when a parent calls the school and says, I don't think we should be teaching this book.
I think they send out usually, they used to send out a paper notice saying that we were going to let the kids read this book. We have a couple parents that are upset about it. If you have any questions or do not want your child to read this book, please, send a thing back, a note or whatever. So when that happened to my oldest daughter, there was a thing that they had to go through, a movie that they were going to watch, but the school would not let them watch it. And some of the kids could watch it and some of them couldn't. So the kids that weren't going to watch the movie didn't go to school that day. And then we also had one time a video that they didn't want the kids to watch, The Golden Compass. They said it was against God and something other, the devil, or I don't know. I didn't think it was, so I was letting them watch it if they wanted to. It was just a cartoon. And then, but they do usually make us aware that a couple parents aren't happy with something that they've picked. And then they let us decide. They usually give you like a week for you to either read it, review what's going on, and then give your bit of advice. Usually we've never had anybody say, oh, we all hate it, we don't want to read it.
So what usually happens? Is it just some kids opt out?
They opt out, and the parents are allowed to let them opt out, and they'll pick a different book. They'll just have to do a separate assignment.
So are you happy with that process, or do you think it could be different?
I think it could be different. I think that, if you have 80 parents that say it's okay and you have 10 that say it's not, then the 10 might want to get a little bit of grip on reality and let their kid read the book. I don't believe that they should read everything, but they should read a lot so they're at least ready to go on to high school. Even if they're going to another private high school, they're going to learn a lot more from their friends than they are that book.
So you think it harms the kids that opt out?
I think it does harm the kids that opt out. I think that they should get a little bit of seeing it and talking about it in a classroom than learning out from their friends on the playground, or from their friends and learning other stuff off of YouTube and things like that.
So you think the kids should have more involvement in the process?
I think they should.
Like
a little
they
bit.
should maybe tell the kids like what it's about, and maybe be like, "What do you want to read this?" I mean, the kid can't have all the power. their
No,
parents.
but I think that the parents should actually really think about, is it really going to harm them, some of the stuff? I mean, like this book that we read,
Part-time Indian.
Part-Time Indian, I think it would have been fine. I mean, it's a 13-year-old boy, and 13-year-old boys do masturbate and things like that, and they need to hear some of this. I mean, so they know it's okay, that they're not weird or things like that.
There was one, when we were getting ready for this podcast, we did some research on, this book's been challenged. Like, it was published in 2007, and the first challenge was in 2009, and it's been challenged all across America. Mostly in the Northwest, which is surprisingly where the book takes place. I don't know if that has something to do with it, but mostly in the Northwest and the East. But one of them, like, it's always usually either about the masturbation or profanity or racism. Those are usually the main things that get a challenge. But one was, one case was in Iowa. There was this one parent challenged it. This one class was teaching it, and only one parent had a problem with it. But instead of calling the teacher of the school, they called the curriculum director, who is in charge of the whole school district. And they said, I don't like this book. And we don't even know why. We don't know what the problem was with the book. But the curriculum director was like, okay, and they took the books off all the shelves and emailed all the teachers, we're not teaching this book anymore. Like, didn't say what's going on. And then all the teachers were like, what's up? We want to teach this book. And then they went to the superintendent and said, yeah, this is what happened. Why aren't we teaching the book anymore? And then the superintendent's like, oh, well, I don't like this book, so I agree. We're just not going to teach it anymore. I'm glad this happened. And then all the teachers were mad because they didn't get to say anything. And only one parent complained about the book. And there's still, like, this happened in 2015, and it's still going on right now. The teachers are still trying to get it put back on the shelves, but those two other people are still, like, in control, so they said no. So, and the other, like, one of the things, that's, like, not a good way to handle it, but they also actually, this school district had a process where when a parent challenges a book, they had, you form a committee with, like, teachers, parents, administrators, and all these other people to talk about it, which they didn't do. So hearing about that, do you have any problems with how they handled that, or if that happened in your school?
If that happened in my school, I'd be upset, because it is a good book. I'm sure there's a lot of good books for that reading age, for kids at that age to read, but it is a good book. It goes over a lot of things. It's not too long. It's interesting the whole time. And it's an easy read book, and it'll keep kids interested in reading. And that's the hard thing. It's hard to keep a group of 30 kids to read one book and all of them to keep reading it. And this pretty much covers pretty much every personality, every kid, that they could sit down and read the book. That they wouldn't say, oh, this is such a girly book, or I hate this book, or you know what I mean? It does cover both sexes.
Yeah, like, even though it's a guy's point of view, it's not a really guy
point of view. And it'll keep girls interested, and it's funny, it's very sad, but it's hard to find a good book for these kids to read, and that actually is educational for them to help in certain kind of things, like the family aspect, the aspect of all the people dying in the kid's life, and the racism, the bullying, and, you know, all that, and the swearing. Those kids say much worse words at a younger age.
in real life.
In real life than the 13-year-olds.
So you don't think, like, parents who are
No,
like, oh,
I don't
there's
think
profanity.
parents. Yeah, I think that there should be a heck of a lot more than one person calling up and saying they don't like the book, and everybody to say, okay, we're taking the books off the shelf. I think there should be some kind of council to go over the book, have people review the book again or something. I mean, that's ridiculous, because it's hard getting books. I mean, some of these kids are still reading, you know, Where the Red Fern Grows, and Yeller, Old Yeller. I mean, yes, some of them are classics, but you got to read a little bit something different here.
You think, like, books like Old Yeller, like like good book, classic, but not really. This
Up with the times.
this pertains more to what's going on.
This pertains more to what's going on now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the classics are great, and put a couple in there so you know, the classics are there, but you need some new books. And you need something that'll keep kids reading.
Old Yeller, I read that. That was a tough. Especially me, because I'm not a huge. I'm an animal person, but animal books were like the main things in animal. It's not really. It doesn't hold my interest.
No, and it won't pertain to all 30 kids in the class.
It didn't really pertain. Like, I know I wasn't the only kid, but I didn't really like Old Yeller. And I hated reading it. Hated being forced to. So I understand that, yeah. And I could maybe see. Other kids not. It's a
Wanting
book.
to read it either.
It takes place like the 1800s.
I think was it early 1900s?
Yeah, because they were in like the Wild West, like on the frontier. Like
Oh, it might be 1800.
it was before they were out in the West before there were city. It was kind of like after the, there wasn't a lot of people out in the West, and they were all moving out there,
Yeah.
building their own houses, making their own life. Because I remember the dad wasn't there. He was out. He was making money and sending the money back somewhere. But
So it's not things that are going to pertain to kids now.
there's not a lot of kids, I'm sure, especially where you live, where there's dads across the country.
He's got to ship 20 cents.
To the mom who's,
And using a rifle, killing pigs and steers and
the 14-year-old boy's like the one out hunting
for food.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I know you have to read some of the classics, but this doesn't pertain now.
I don't know if you knew this, but Part-Time, Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian is actually based off, a lot of the aspects of the book are true stories or very closely true to the author Sherman Alexie's childhood. And I don't know, do you think that affects the book? Like,
I do. I think it would make kids more interested in the book, thinking, oh my gosh, this poor kid. I mean, he was born to a life of doom with, they pretty much said he was going to die or he was going to be mentally retarded or never walk and everything else. I mean, and he turned his life around. He, and it seemed like he was going to do great things at the end of the book, that he was going to move on off the reservation, he was going to college. I mean, it seemed like it was a good ending for him. I mean, even though he had so much death in his family, he seemed like he was going to at least make it out.
Last question. I have another one after this I thought of though. But hold on, let me leave a pause so I can edit that out. Do the positive aspects outweigh the negative ones? And you've kind of been agreeing with us throughout the interview, but just an overall answer to that question.
Do the positive parts of the book
Outweigh the bad?
Yes. There's not really bad in the book. I mean,
Yeah, like I said, the interview,
yeah.
you seem to be on board with the book. But
Yeah. I think definitely.
And then another question I thought of was, so you mentioned how you think like the parents who are opting their kids out, like that's not good for the kids. There was actually, Sherman Alexie, the author, wrote this article talking about called Best Child Books Are Written in Blood. And it's a really good article, basically just him saying how this book, a lot of kids who've gone through, like, kids who've been raped, kids who've been, like, are physically abused by their parents every day, or bullied, or have seen horrible things, like Junior in the book, have called him, mailed him, or written him letters talking about how much they love the book and how much it helps them. So, and then he's talking about in the article how people still, challenge the book, saying they don't want, it's usually white parents, saying they don't want their kids reading about this kind of stuff. So, shielding their kids from the bad that kids around them, especially if you're in a public school, like your daughter is or your son's going there, like knowing that other kids in the class live this every day. Do you think sheltering them or banning books that are based off of true life or not, but realistic things that happen, is that affecting their perception of reality?
Yes, I don't think it's beneficial for them to ban the book. I mean, I think they should know what's going on. I just think it should be offered maybe at different times of their life or in their ages, or different maturity levels of them. But I think this book's fine. I mean,
Like reading this book, you didn't want to challenge, if your kid was reading
no,
it, you'd be like,
not
oh,
at all. No.
Yeah, it's one of the most banned books.
Oh my gosh.
It's on the top 10.
What's the
So.
top one?
Huckleberry Finn's on there, and that's just because of the N-word,
Oh my gosh.
which, I mean, it's bad, but that was
They shouldn't. Yeah, that's how they talked back then, like in Old
And it
Yeller.
kind of shows, like,
Yeah. And how the people were, how ignorant, and how it was used.
Speak is up there. That's a really good. I watched the movie, haven't read the book, and I want to, but
Evan
it's-
did?
No, I've seen
Oh.
the movie. I haven't read the book yet, but it's really good. It's Lori Hall Sanderson, who I actually read a lot when I was younger. Not controversial books, but then Speak is about a girl, an 8th grader, is raped by a high schooler at a party, and she goes to high school with him, and she stops talking after she's raped, and her friends don't say anything, her parents don't say anything, but they all notice she stops talking. She starts wearing like baggy clothes, and it's just kind of about her going through, like, she's in high school with the guy who raped her, and she's all alone and dealing with it. But it gets banned a lot because people don't want them reading about rape, or some parents even call it soft pornography, which I don't know how you can call rape soft pornography.
Yeah. It's a violent act.
Actually, one time this book was challenged, the parents said it was soft pornography.
Where's the pornography at?
I don't know, because the one scene everything in the book, everything's sexual in the book. He doesn't describe anything. He just says, "I masturbate. I want to touch that one girl's boobs. They kiss," but he doesn't describe anything. He just says it, and it's over.
Well, I wouldn't think that would be in there. Not at all.
One grandma challenged it, saying it was bestiality. Which, when we read that,
What?
There's bestiality in the book. Which me and my partner read that, we're like, where?
Where?
She has to be making this up, and then we went back and read, there's that joke, the racist joke that the guy says at the beginning of the book when he goes to the new school. He says that about the buffalo, like you know how we know, I think it was like like
if a
black
buffalo and a
people,
white person have a baby.
it's an Indian or something.
Yes,
It was something really racist.
God,
and I
no.
know I read that and I didn't even think bestiality. I thought, wow, that's really racist.
Yeah, I thought that was racist.
So the grandma, I don't think took
No,
away.
exactly, no.
I don't think she took away the message. But-
She missed the boat on that one.
But but overall, you would let your kids read
I
this
would,
book.
yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, and that's all I have. If you have any final comments, okay, then we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You last.